Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the April 4th edition of Dr. Pitt's Tips Live. So glad that you could log in and check out the conversation tonight. Tonight, we're talking about parenting, but as usual, before I get into that topic, I want to tell you why I do this and why it's so incredibly important that you share this conversation with family members, friends, colleagues, loved ones, people that you can't stand, mama and daddy and them, brothers and sisters and them, your boys, your girls, and all of those folks. Look, what we know to be true is that in so many of our communities, black, brown, white, it don't make a difference, but particularly in black and brown communities, one of the persistent issues that we have is there is a stigma associated with therapy, associated with behavioral and mental health and relational health. And I understand. I always hear my grandfather's voice in my ears saying, "Baby, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink." And I really believe that if I'm serious about being authentically who I am, if I'm serious about walking in the fullness of God's purpose for my life, then I have to do what I know is right to do. And what I know is right to do is to be a part of the solutions and not a part of the problem. So this is not about clicks. This is not about how large the following is or anything like that. It's about taking very seriously the blessing and the privilege that I have of being formally educated and trained as a licensed couple marriage and family therapist, as someone who is considered a behavioral, a relationship, and in many ways a human behavior expert in my field. And I feel like I'm doing my family, my friends, my community, and truth be told, the world a disservice if I don't share this information that I've learned from formal education and training, but also that I've learned from just real life experiences. How many times have you heard people say that experience is a good teacher? Well, I truly believe that the valuable lessons that I've learned, both personally and professionally, are of great value to people that are within earshot, people that I encounter in my life's journey. And that's why I do this work, because my social media manager said, "Dr. Pitts, well, you know what? Part of being the solution and not a part of the problem is when people won't come to you, you bring the information to them." And that's why I do this week in and week out. And I hope that you will see the value in the information that I'm sharing. I hope that you will share the information. We've heard it said that people perish for lack of knowledge. And I remember growing up hearing all the time, "Oh, child, go sit down. What you don't know won't hurt you." And as a kid, I accepted that because I didn't know any better. But I'm at a place in space now at 56 years old where I recognize that when you know better, you do better. And what I know to do better is this. First and foremost, understanding that what you don't know can hurt you. What you don't know will hurt you, dependent upon whatever it is, the knowledge that we're talking about. So the reason why I want to talk about parenting is because as a couple marriage and family therapist, I have a lot of things that come. Hey, Ronnie Ron. I have a lot of clients that come into session. Not only are they having issues within their relationships, within their family system, and some even having issues within their community or problems with their children at school, but if we're honest, people learn how to parent based on how they were parented, right? And yes, there are absolutely positively individuals who were properly raised, they were parented in very healthy, positive, and productive ways. But then we have a whole part of the global population that was not parented healthy, that if we're not careful clinically, we have a term called the multi-generational transmission process. And what happens in that multi-generational transmission process is those dysfunctional, those unhealthy behaviors that occurred in one's life have the ability to carry over from generation to generation to generation. If we were to look at those things in a spiritual context, we'll call them generational curses. But the bottom line is, whether you're looking at it through a spiritual lens or you're looking at it through a natural lens, they are dysfunctional behaviors that are detrimental to the overall development of your children. They were detrimental to you, if you're honest, and those behaviors need to be identified, they need to be appropriately addressed, and they need to be broken. You all that listen to me on a regular know that I'm very, very passionate about a number of things. And one of the things that I am extremely passionate about is healthy parenting, because, and I say this publicly, my mom has openly acknowledged it, just like many of us, she's made mistakes, right? And she owns those mistakes. What took time for us to get to the place and space was how the mistakes that she made in her, because she was young, she was 19 when she got pregnant with me. She made mistakes for a variety of reasons, and those mistakes that were made were detrimental to my emotional development. They were detrimental to my relational development. Now, let me just tell you, before you all go accusing me of judging and criticizing my mother, I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is, we have had a very honest, vulnerable, and transparent conversation, and she was able to get to a place and space where she acknowledged that some of the ways that she parented me, not only were they not healthy, but they were detrimental to my development as a child and as a human being. One of the things that we say all the time in therapy is the first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. You cannot heal the perhaps the inappropriate ways that you parent if you don't even acknowledge that you're parenting in unhealthy ways, if you don't even acknowledge that some of the ways that you parented were not holistically beneficial to your overall well-being. And for those of you that dare to hide behind the Bible, because many of us were raised according to spare the rod and spoil the child, we were also raised according to rear your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And one of the scriptures that stays in the forefront of my mind in Ephesians that people don't talk a lot about is, provoke not your children unto wrath. Woo! Folk don't want to talk about that, because, I come from a family system where you do as I say, not as I do. Children are seen or not heard. Y'all kids go on outside and play. But is that healthy? When you look at some of the parenting practices that many of us were reared according to, is that holistically healthy for the overall development of your children, of your grandchildren? And as someone that spent the first part of my clinical career working with children, I will tell you that many of those parenting practices are not working. I've said before on my podcast, and I do believe I've said before during this live, one of the youngest children that I ever worked with was a suicidal 5-year-old. Seriously? And we're talking about a suicidal 5-year-old that was dealing with depression. Well, some of you might be saying, well, Dr. Pitts, what on earth does a 5-year-old know about suicide? Nothing. But they knew that the pain that they were experiencing was so great that they wished that they were dead. How about that? I can't tell you how many times I've had people say to me, well, you know what, Dr. Pitts, he or she's just a crybaby. They're just too sensitive. They just, they just need to toughen up a little bit. Let me tell you something. The suicide rate among, and I don't have those stats right in front of me. I've quoted them before. I'm not even going to look them up. You look them up. The suicide rate among children in this country is on the rise. We saw a spike in suicide rates and a spike in mental health issues among children during the pandemic, and those numbers have been escalating ever since. And for those of you who might be suggesting that, oh, well, black and brown kids don't kill themselves, the devil is a liar. Yes, they do. And you need to check the facts. Go to NIMH.gov, go to NIH.gov, go to the CDC.gov. Go to the resources that are proven empirical research that show valid data on these statistics, and look for yourself and see how fragile our children are. And what I want to ask you is, as a parent, as a primary caregiver, are you promoting healthy development in the child? Or are your parenting practices so rigid, so hostile, so intense that you're fracturing the sense of self of that child, that you are fracturing their development, and you are setting that child up to be a psychological wreck. I'll let you marinate in that for a moment. So what I thought it would be really helpful to do is I have my treatment planner in front of me. And one of the things that I want to break down for you, and I'm just going to go through the list really, really quick of these 6 items that are connected to childhood trauma. It's things that we screen for. Does the child report, or excuse me, does the adult or the child, right? But in this context, I'm going to share it with you from an adult perspective. Is there reports of childhood physical, sexual, and or emotional abuse? Is there a description of parents as physically or emotionally neglectful, as they were chemically dependent, too busy, absent, etc.? Is there a description of childhood as chaotic, as parents were substance abusers or mentally ill or engaged in antisocial behavior, etc., leading to frequent moves, multiple abusive partners, frequent substitute caretakers, financial pressures, and or many other siblings? Are there reports of emotionally repressive parents who were rigid, perfectionist, threatening, demeaning, hypocritical, and or overly religious? Are there irrational fears, suppressed rage, low self-esteem, identity conflicts, depression, or anxious insecurity related to painful early life experiences? Is there dissociation phenomena, dissociative identity disorder? For those of you who don't know what that is, multiple personalities, because that is a negative coping mechanism. You can take on other personalities to help you to deal with the trauma that you're being faced with. Is there dissociative amnesia? In other words, you know what? You've blocked out your whole childhood. And or depersonalization or derealization as a negative coping mechanism resulting from childhood emotional pain. So what I want you to ask yourself is, first and foremost, do any of those things ring true based on your childhood? And if they rang true in your childhood, what have you done to address those traumatic experiences? And if you're honest, because I need you to be honest here, have you addressed those childhood traumatic experiences in such a way that they are not adversely impacting how you parent your own child or children? And if the answer is no, Dr. Pitts, I have not addressed them, and yes, if I'm honest with myself, they are impacting how I parent in a negative way, my challenge to you today is to be deliberate and intentional in getting the help that you need, not only for the sake of your child, but for your own sake. Because, as one of my mentors told me, once you get cancer in the house, it's hard to get it out. And there are many, 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 metaphorically, cancer family systems that we encounter day in and day out. And I need you to be honest here. I need you to be honest because our children are in states of distress. Our children are more vulnerable and more fractured and more susceptible to enemy encroachment, perhaps than they've ever been in the history of the foundation of the earth. And oh, by the way, when you factor in all of these other societal things that are at play, i.e. the internet, and the impact that social media and cyberbullying is having on the overall development of our children, I challenge you to do a self-check, to take personal inventory so that you can know whether or not you need to modify your parenting style so that you are not wounding your children. Anybody that knows me personally, and even some that know me professionally, know that when it comes to abuse, neglect, and maltreatment of children, my head pops off. I will work with abusers, but to be totally transparent, I'm not the most gentle with them. Is that a work on for me? Probably. but I'm willing to own the fact that's a thing for me. And I won't even say that it's countertransference. I just don't like bullies. I don't take kindly to anybody for any reason that thinks that it's okay to abuse, neglect, or otherwise mistreat a helpless child. I think that it's disgusting. Now, I'll help you get healthy, but we're going to have to, we're going to have some really strong elephant in the room conversations. Because at some point in time, there has to be a willingness to break this vicious cycle that's pervasive all over the country, in our homes. So I want to give you some things to consider as it relates directly to parenting, and then I'm going to share with you some tips. And as always, I welcome questions. You can shoot me questions. If I don't know the answer, trust and believe. I'm humble enough to be like, I do not know, but I have a large enough network globally that I can find out the answer. But chances are I'll be able to give you a sound clinical response to whatever your presenting question may be. So from a parenting perspective, so when I'm working with parents, there's some key things that I'm looking for. Is there an expression of feelings of inadequacy in setting effective limits with the child? So one of the things that I absolutely love, I was doing a session today with a client who was facing a challenge with their child in school. And what I absolutely positively respect about this parent is that this individual is not one of those parents that acts like their child walks on water. They acknowledge the fact that, you know what, I know my child. I know my child, and there's chances are that the child said or did whatever it was that the child was being accused of saying or doing. But for those of you that don't know how to set effective limits with your child, and you let them say and do whatever they want to say and do, and they don't respect you, and they don't respect educators, and they don't respect authority, Houston, we have a problem. One of the things that I have come to believe when it comes to parenting is that we have to have, in a healthy way, we have to have positive, productive, at times, albeit hard conversations with our children regarding their conduct so that the police won't have to, or so that the police won't come knocking on our door. I'm not talking about those extenuating circumstances where our children were victimized by police officers or gun violence in the street or whatever the case may be. I'm talking about a child that has become entitled and thinks that the world owes them everything under the sun that they want because the parent or the primary caregiver has not done a good job of setting appropriate limits with the child. And quite frankly, if you're honest, you don't know how to. And you don't know how to because you're dealing with guilt and shame, and you're overcompensating for an absent parent and all of these things. You're doing your child a disservice if you don't put effective limits in place for them when it comes to their conduct and their attitude and their mindset. Because if you don't, society will check them hard. And society will do it without any empathy. So you'll still go to jail. You can sit on the witness stand and be like, oh, they had an abusive childhood and all these things, and they'll still go to jail. Or you may still have to bury them. And nobody wants to go through that. Second thing, is there reports of difficulty in managing the challenging problem behavior of the child? In some cases, the child's behavior is a mere reflection of what they've seen growing up. Sometimes the child's behavior is a mere reflection of poor parenting. Sometimes the child's behavior is a result of unresolved trauma because there's a stigma against therapy in our communities. I'm speaking now specifically to Black and brown communities. So why would I, wait, he'll be all right. She'll be all right. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pray about it. That's what we're going to do. Well, the Bible that I read talks about wisdom, and you can pray, but you also better get that child to see a therapist, somebody that can help you to address the trauma that the child has experienced, particularly if you don't have a clue as how to effectively do that. And if you have experienced trauma and you haven't addressed your own trauma, how on God's green earth are you going to be able to appropriately help your child navigate their trauma? Something to think about. Number 3, are there frequent struggles to control your emotional reactions to the child's behavior? Woo! Won't that preach? I'm gonna let you sit there for a minute. Does my child have my code? Am I screaming, yelling, hooping, hollering, cussing, fussing, threatening to break every bone in their face, their arm, their neck, their back? Am I threatening to kill them? Am I threatening to throw them outside? Am I talking about putting them out in the street? Am I, do I call myself instilling the fear of God? But what it really says is, my child has my code, and I demonstrate to them that it's okay to not have self-control and self-discipline. Part of what many of you are dealing with is your child is you. That part. Let me say that again. Your child, your baby, boo-boo and them, they're you. They are a mirror image of you. And what's really happening is now you know what it's like to deal with you. I know some of you had parents who said, when you grow up, I hope you have kids that act just like you. I know my mom sure enough did. That part. Are they you? They mini me's? 4, is there increased conflict? Jesus. Is there increased conflict between the parents over how to parent or discipline the child? In other words, clinical term, is it a poor co-caregiver alliance? Y'all not on the same page. You hate each other's guts. You made a decision. You know what? We're not talking about those extenuating circumstances where somebody was sexually assaulted, got pregnant, decided to keep the kid. Don't overthink it and be all extra with it. I'm talking about those situations and circumstances where you intentionally or unintentionally got pregnant. And now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 13 kids. Sometimes there's multiple baby mamas. Sometimes there's multiple baby daddies. And y'all cannot agree on nothing. And the kid ends up, clinical term, being triangulated into all of this strife and discord and craziness that's going on between the parents. Because the mama is treating the little boy like a baby, and the dad is saying you gonna make him soft, and the dad is babying the daughter, and the mom is jealous because he paid more attention to the daughter than he did. Any of that sound familiar? I know it does. I've been doing this for a long time, so I know it does. I know I'm all up in the crevices of your life. So now these children are caught in the middle of parental war zone, and they ain't even asked to be here. Number 5, are there deficits in parenting knowledge and skills? Well, yeah. And let me just go here about these young parents, because we do know that the age of the parent and the grandparent and the great-grandparent is getting younger and younger. Knowing how to take care of a baby doll, because you played with, Baby Alive and Tender Love and all of them when you was a little girl, does not give you the skills and the knowledge on how to be an effective parent. So what do people do? They repeat what they saw, oftentimes to the detriment of the child. Here's, for those of you who think that I'm off base, why do you think there's a child protective services in every state? Ding! There's a child protective service in every state because there are parents and primary caregivers who repeatedly demonstrate that they do not have effective parenting knowledge and skills. So then what ends up happening is CPS, DFS, DYF, S, and all the other S's end up having to come in and take your children or put you on lock and make you go to parenting classes and all of those things because you have not learned how to parent effectively. Matter of fact, you won't even acknowledge that you were a raggedy parent. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. It is what it is. Just saying. Or they're inconsistent parenting styles. You know, consistency is your friend. Children respond to order, structure, discipline, and consistency. That repetition, that teaching a child, whether you're teaching them good behaviors, bad behaviors, manners, respect, whatever it is you're teaching them, repetition. All of us are products of what we've been conditioned to learn. So what are you teaching your child by repetition? Why are you so inconsistent in your parenting style? Again, is it lack of knowledge? Is it embarrassment? Is it shame? Is it humiliation? What is it? Is there a pattern of lax supervision and inadequate limit setting? I can't even tell you how many times I've seen that among friends, family members, community members. When I used to teach school, kids just do and say whatever they want to say. When I say do and say whatever it is they want to say, zero respect for authority, zero manners. Many of us grew up with children respect their elders. That's a cuss word today. F you. I don't have to. You ain't my mama. You ain't my daddy. F you and the horse she rode in on. Oh. Learned behavior. I say respectfully, you are failing egregiously as a parent if you do not provide healthy order, structure, and discipline for your child or your children. Because know that if you don't, the police, the wardens, and the COs will gladly do it for you. Our juvenile detention centers all over this country are full. Our prisons are overpopulated. I was told by someone that the men's prison in Wilmington, Delaware, Gander Hill, is so overpopulated that prisoners are having to be on pallets in the hallways. What? And I used to work as a therapist in a facility for adjudicated youth, 13 to 19 and a half. Pretty close to full census most of the time that I worked there. Kids just as disrespectful, ignorant, obnoxious, no home training, just walking wounded. Little felons in the making. And that was, oh, by the way, that was females and males. 13 to 19 and a half. Already in the system. Where are the parents? Where are the primary caregivers? What examples are being set? I remember I was working with an inmate and had a great rapport with this kid. And at the time that I got him on my caseload, I want to say he was 14. And I wasn't Dr. Pitts back then. I was Miss Pitts. He said, Miss Pitts, my dad is at Gander, my grandpapa's at Gander, and all of my uncles are at Gander. That's a problem, folks. That is a problem. Where are the parents at? Do you regularly overindulge your children and give them everything that they wish for or demand because you think that that's the way to get them to love you and to respect you? Are you overcompensating for the absent parent? Are you overcompensating for the guilt that you feel when you maybe didn't make the best parenting decisions, but now you're trying to make up for where you dropped the ball. You're doing them a disservice because you're setting them up for destructive entitlement. And this is kids and adult children. You're setting them up. This one's one that really gets me. I feel it in my gut. Is there a display of a pattern of harsh, rigid, and demeaning behavior towards a child? If there is one thing that makes me want to spit fire, is folk that scream, yell, hoop, holler, cuss, belittle, degrade, and demean their children. I cannot stand it. I can't stand it. What on God's green earth could a child that you birthed or whose egg you fertilized do or say so horrific that you got to cuss them out, threaten to kill them, and call them everything but a child of God? They're a product of you. They didn't ask to be here. So why do you think it is okay to absolutely, positively destroy their sense of self? Why do you think that it's okay to make them feel like they are absolutely, positively nothing? Because you're the walking wounded? Because you have unresolved childhood trauma? Because you never addressed some of the issues that you've developed because of how harshly you were parented? Help me to understand why, for those of you that were parented in this way, know you didn't like it. Know that you hate your parents for it. Know that you wanted your head to pop off. Why would you turn around and make a conscious decision to parent in the exact same way that's left you the walking wounded? Why would you do that? You deserved better. Why would you not give your children better? Why would you not make a conscious decision to love your children, to embrace them, and to breathe life into them in a way that you wish you could have had? I need you to think about that thing. I do. I really need you to think about that. Or is there a pattern of physical and emotional abusive parenting? That ties into what I said before. Emotional, physical, sexual, like all of those abusive things. If it diminishes, if it shatters the child's spirit, if it shatters the child's self-esteem, if it shatters the child's self-worth, you're failing as a parent. Some of you think that providing clothes, food, and shelter is enough. No, it's not. There's more than clothes, food, and shelter that make us who we are. And again, your children didn't ask to be here, just like we didn't ask to be here. So why would you choose to abuse, neglect, or mistreat a child that you birthed, or a child that you made a conscious decision to be a primary caregiver for? Why would you do that? How do you sleep at night? Is there a lack of knowledge regarding reasonable expectations for your child's behavior given their developmental level? This one's huge because, particularly in society today, so many of our children are growing up so much faster than they should. They are being exposed to adult content. They are being exposed to adult responsibilities. They are being held accountable at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16, 17 years old for handling responsibilities that psychologically they do not have the appropriate development to be able to handle. And what it creates is unfinished business. Dr. Pitts, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is many of these children are growing up so fast, they're bypassing their childhood. So now you have an entire section of their life, an entire portion of their development that they have missed out on. Do you think for a moment that those voids are not going to reveal their ugly head at different stages of the child's life as they continue to navigate the life cycle? Oh, they're absolutely positively going to show up. Isn't that what happened to you? All of the adult responsibility that you had to take on, it frustrated your growth. May not have frustrated your growth physically, but it frustrated your growth relationally and emotionally. And now that multi-generational transmission persists. How can you expect a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old to know how to do things that you haven't even developed mastery of as an adult? Something to think about, huh? I want you to pause right there. If you're honest, there are responsibilities that you have not developed mastery of as an adult. So why are you expecting your children, who are still children and adolescents, to develop that mastery? To me, that sounds like you're imposing expectations upon your children that you yourself can't even meet. That's a self-reflection item that can raise your awareness if you have the courage to look deep and acknowledge what your personal deficiencies are. And then the last thing on the parenting list is, have you exhausted ideas and resources in attempting to deal with your child's negative behavior? That's a problem that a lot of people run into. The child's behavior has been allowed to go on for so long that people are embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated, and they don't even know how to reel the child in. I was working with a client one time, and they were talking about a child in their family and how this 8-year-old child was literally just destroying the house, breaking up TVs and destroying clothes and breaking dishes and deliberately breaking appliances. And the client said, Dr. Pitts, what do I do with this? I said, you need to get the child help. I said, is the child also acting out in school? Yes. I said, the school hasn't intervened yet. But in this case, this was an African American child. So what we know to be true in the public school system is that Black children are disciplined far more harshly and far more frequently than children from other ethnic groups are. So what can end up happening is the school can take action to have that child mandated to restrictive settings. And when you get to what we refer to as a D setting, they're putting your child out of the school, and the child will be forced to go to an alternative education school. You're not helping by ignoring the problem. I'm not saying that having a child with behaviors is not, frustrating or maybe even embarrassing or humiliating or whatever the case may be. But you not addressing it is not going to make it go away. It doesn't work that way. If you want to get resolved, you have to acknowledge it for what it is. And don't Don't pass off these extreme behaviors as, oh, he's just being a boy, or oh, she's just being a girl, or oh, she's just a spoiled brat. Let me tell you something. There's more going on if your spoiled brat thinks that it's okay to throw something into the TV because you told them that they had to turn the TV off, take a bath, and go to bed. There's more going on if you say no and the kid slaps everything off the shelf in the store. There's more going on if, and some of you might be like, nobody does that. Black kids cuss their parents out. I've seen it. I've seen them do it as kids. I've seen them do it as adolescents. And I've seen them do it as adults. I have worked with parents who were scared of their children. And yes, they were black. But they didn't come out the womb. They wasn't scared of the child when the child came out the womb. It's these behaviors that haven't been addressed. So how do you engage in more effective parenting? I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to tell you. Well, for one, why don't we start with the parent? I want to encourage you to take inventory of your parenting style. I want you to take inventory of your parenting practices. I want you to take inventory of the behaviors, both positive and negative, that you've carried over into your parenting ritual that you learned from your primary caregiver or whoever your parent was. You gotta acknowledge it before you can fix it. So you need to do a self-check and be honest. Because here's the thing. This is a tell for you. If you are apprehensive about parenting your child in public the way you parent them in private, that's a key indication to you that you need to improve your parenting. Because you can redirect a child, you can correct a child, you can discipline a child and not lose your daggone mind and catch a charge. If your parenting style at home is not suitable for public view, you have a problem. And you need to look at that. So you got to be honest with yourself. The things that you say and do behind closed doors, would you say and do them in front of a judge, in front of a police officer, in front of whatever? And some of you might say, yeah, and that's fine if it's suitable. But if it's not, then, and you cool catching a charge because you were an abusive parent, rock out. I can tell you that your kid's going into foster care or having to go stay with another family member because of your abusive parenting style is going to further fracture your child. Just saying. So the first thing is you got to look at you. You have to do inventory of how you're parenting. Second thing is, and if you don't know how, Google it. Learn how to boost your child's self-esteem. But for some of you, you can't boost your child's self-esteem because you haven't even taken time to boost your own. So some of this you might need to be doing simultaneously. Boost your child's self-esteem. Here's the thing. Kids start developing their sense of self as babies, and they're going to view themselves through our eyes as parents. It's like, and I've had people, call me on it, they disagreed. That's cool. I started telling my son at a very, 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 very young age that he was royalty and that he had a responsibility to treat people with the same decency and respect that he wanted others to treat him. And when I say I told him that he was royalty, I didn't really mean that. Not really. I did not mean that in a grandiose or narcissistic way. I actually meant that in spiritual context, meaning that he's a child of God. And because of that, he is an heir to the throne of God. And there are certain things that he has access to, providing that he is conducting himself in an appropriate manner according to biblical principle. That's what I meant by that, for those of you that start tripping and talking stupid. So anyway, boost your child's self-esteem. Be your child's biggest cheerleader. Be the president of your child's fan club. Be the captain of your child's cheerleading squad, right? In building their sense of self and breathing life into them and letting them know how amazing and wonderful they are. 2, you don't have to be punitive all the time. When there are plenty of kids out here that negative attention is better than no attention at all. And because you don't acknowledge when they're being good, because you're one of those people that operates from the narrative of, well, why would I reward them for doing what they're supposed to do? Because it builds your sense of self. Because it reiterates to them that, yes, you are doing what you're supposed to do, and we're going to celebrate that, because the flip side of it is you could be doing a bunch of stuff that you're not supposed to do, and society will penalize you for that. So if you can penalize, why can't you reward? There is positive development that comes from rewarding your children when they do good. And no, you don't have to reward every single solitary thing. It's not always about spending money. Sometimes it's enough to say, you know what, I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it. That's right, you won. You did that thing. It's not all about money. It's not all about necessarily tangible words. It's words of affirmation that reinforce to them that they're amazing and wonderful and can do anything they set their mind to. The third thing goes back to what I said about discipline and limits. You have to set limits and be consistent with your discipline. Now, I will say this. For some of you, you're not effective at doing that because you're not effective at managing your own life that way. So therein lies opportunity to learn how to set limits and to be consistent and disciplined. But if you yourself lack self-control and self-discipline, trust and believe your children are going to model that behavior. So why you mad? You have to be willing to improve your demonstration of appropriate limits and discipline. Fourth thing, make time for your kids. As someone who was a single parent, I respect and recognize how challenging it can be to juggle your work schedule, to juggle your school schedule, to juggle your kids' activities, to juggle your recreation activities, and the whole 9 yards. But the bottom line is your kids didn't ask to be here. And sometimes making time for your kids could be something as simple as old school, sitting down and actually having a meal together, watching a movie together, actually having a fulfilling conversation with them. If you don't spend quality time with your children, know that there are plenty of other people who may not always be an appropriate influence who will be willing to spend time with your children. Children need your time, your attention, and your love. Stop treating your kids like they're a buzzing fly or mosquito in your ear. Get away from me. Get out of my room. I'm trying to watch TV. Why you Your children need you. They need you to raise your emotional intelligence. They need you to improve your relational intelligence. And they need you to be emotionally and physically available for them. They need to know that beyond clothes, food, and shelter, that they are a priority. And you can demonstrate to them that they're a priority by making time to spend quality time with them. You got to be a good role model. That do as I say, not as I do crap, that mess don't work. That I grew up with that double standard. That's why at 56 years old, I hate double standards. Don't tell me do as I say, not as I do. Model for me what I'm supposed to do properly. Because you know what ends up happening? The kids do what they see you do, and then you're trying to beat their back in. You're talking about punching them in the face. You embarrassing them and shaming them and acting like a park ape out in public. But all they did was do what you did. They lied because you lied. They stole because you stole. They cheated because you cheated. They filth, florin filth because they saw you do it. So why are you mad? They're behaving like a mini you. You're their first role model. You're supposed to be their first positive, productive example of how to conduct themselves at all times. So I ask you, what type of example are you setting for your children? Make communication a priority. And can I just say, healthy communication? Make healthy communication a priority. Children need to know that you're an emotionally safe space for them. If they cannot talk to you without you screaming, yelling, hooping, hollering, cussing, fussing, and acting like a lunatic, they're going to go talk to somebody else. That's what I did. When I was growing up, I couldn't talk to my mom about nothing. She was a screamer and a yeller. She was a hooper or a holler. She went from 0 to belligerent in 2.3 seconds flat, and she worked shift work. So trying to have a conversation with her when she was on day work, so you know what? I don't even want this type of smoke. I'm just not. So I did all my conversating with other people who I could talk to, and some of those people did not have my best interests at heart. You should be the first line of defense for your children. You should be an emotionally safe space for your children, for your adolescents, and for those of you that have adult children. Learn how to be emotionally available so that your kids do not feel like you know how many times I hear as a therapist, Dr. Pitts, I can't talk to my parents. I never could. Not cool. Be flexible and willing to adjust your parenting style. One of the biggest mistakes that I see that parents make is you have 3, 4 kids and you parent them all the same. Why would you do that? Parenting is not a cookie cutter approach. Everybody has different personalities. You got one kid that's shy, you got one kid that's outgoing, you got one kid that's reckless, you got one kid that got ADHD, ADD, and perhaps other special needs, but you're trying to parent them all the same way. You have to really take time to recognize what the unique characteristics of each child is so that you can parent them more effectively. In this line of work, I've encountered far too many children that I've worked with and adults that I've worked with who've conveyed to me that their parents' love was conditional. As parents, we're responsible for correcting and guiding our children. However, our love for them should not be conditional. If you withhold love as a punitive measure for something your child didn't do, you're wounding them. And you're teaching them that it's okay to do that. And they will. Hence, that's why, I'm going to go ahead and say it. That's why so many women use sex as a weapon. Yep, I said it. I said it, and I'm not apologizing for saying it. That's why so many women use sex as a weapon. Moving right along. Lastly, you have to know your own needs and limitations as a parent. You have to be willing to be vulnerable and transparent with yourself about your own woundedness, your own unresolved trauma, your own personal deficiencies, your own lack of knowledge and skills where parenting is concerned. And I say this last part respectfully, and I do mean it with the utmost respect. I promise you, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody. But I strongly, strongly, strongly want to encourage individuals to stop having children and screwing them up. There's so many people out here, because they are the walking wounded, because they've never resolved their own issues, they're having baby after baby after baby after baby after baby after baby. Many years ago, I did a plea to fathers, and one of the things that I said was, stop fathering all these children. particularly those if you're not going to be actively involved in their life. I found out in January of 2023 that I'm one of 22 children. 22. That's the ones we know about. I'm one of 22 children. I don't need to say anything else, do I? I didn't think so. There are far too many individuals that are having babies that they do not have the financial, the emotional means to rear these children. And what ends up happening is that multi-generational cycle continues. And at some point in time, folks got to stop. You have to stop and take accountability and responsibility for healing. Learn to love yourself enough so that you can properly love your children. And know when it's time to stop. Having a baby that you can't take care of is not the answer to filling that void that you have of not being loved, respected, valued, or appreciated. Having a baby is not the answer to your mommy and your daddy issues. It's not. Matter of fact, it'll complicate them. It'll complicate them. That's all I have. As usual, I have a session in 4 minutes. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to get your questions. I'll be back next week. Next week we are talking about next week we're talking about codependency. That one's gonna be a doozy. So look, that's all I have. I hope it helps. I hope, if nothing that I said was applicable to you, I hope you'll share this information with somebody in your life that you know could benefit from this information. I just want to help. I just want to make a positive difference in the lives of people. See y'all next time. Have a good night.